it works well for women because women have no masculinizing hormones in their body. They have very small amounts of testosterone. They put 20 milligrams of Anavar into their body every day. That's a significant increase, and that's why they respond so well. And women's androgen receptors are more sensitive than men's because of the fact they don't have a lot of testosterone in their body. But for a man to take Anavar, it's like eating M&Ms. I don't know. Maybe M&Ms might give you more energy. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Glad you could join us on this 12th day of July in the year 2023. 30-minute question and answer show, whatever's on your mind: bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation, life, whatever else is going on in and around the bodybuilding world. It is all on the table. We go right in the questions. The first two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. First question: high insulin levels and both blood glucose levels are bad for average untrained people for a variety of metabolic diseases. But what about for someone building muscle?
I've been thinking about insulin a lot and blood sugar control. And, it's a tough subject because, in one situation, you don't want to run high blood sugars, but then you think about, well, if I take exogenous insulin, am I decreasing my insulin sensitivity? Meaning you're putting more insulin into the system. Yes, it's lowering your blood sugar, but are you becoming less insulin sensitive? Your receptors, in other words, producing less receptors because of that. And here's my take on the whole thing. This is my interpretation. And this is, I've been doing this for a long time, and I have pretty good instincts when it comes to how hormones interact in the body. And I can see it on responses of not only myself, but other people. If you take, I'll use myself as an example. If I take a long-acting insulin, okay, like Tresiba or Lantus or Toujeo, because my fasting blood sugars are starting to go up a little bit as I get older, and maybe my beta cells in my pancreas are not quite as astute as they were when I was younger, it lowers my blood sugar. So I wake up with lower fasting blood sugars because I'm taking the burden off my pancreas, right? My pancreas doesn't have to produce as much. Now, the question is, am I decreasing my insulin sensitivity? In other words, is my body cutting back insulin receptors because I'm putting more insulin into the system? Because let's face it, you can't exactly duplicate exactly what you need. You always take a little bit more probably than you need, and to keep your sugars under control. Now, my hemoglobin A1C, which is your average blood sugar over 3 months, has gone dramatically down. It went from 5.5 to 4.9, which is great. Under 5 is tremendous. That means you have very tight blood sugar control. It means you're not going to accumulate, glucose in the brain, in the eyes, in the extremities. You're not going to get those kidneys. You're not going to get the side effects associated with higher blood sugars, which can happen even when you're running slightly high blood sugars. Here's my theory. So if you working out increases insulin sensitivity. We know that. When you do cardio, your blood sugars are better. And it's because your body produces more insulin receptors because the cells want to be fed. So because they want to be fed, they send out more receptors so the insulin can bind them and they can absorb the glucose out of the bloodstream and amino acids by piggybacking. So I think if you're an athlete, okay, and you just do some kind of weight training or cardio, probably weight training better than cardio, but a little of both probably is even better. I think what happens is insulin sensitivity stays very, very high, good in the body. In other words, high insulin receptors. And then if you put a little extra insulin into the body to help the pancreas, you're not going to be suppressing those receptors. Whereas if you're like a couch potato and don't do anything, and you don't want to fix your diet, and you just throw more insulin into the mix so that you can lower your blood sugars, yes, you're solving the problem, but your insulin sensitivity is not going to be so great, meaning your insulin receptor numbers are not going to go up. They might actually go down. Still better to control it, but I think as athletes, we will utilize insulin better than the average person. And that's why when bodybuilders take insulin for performance enhancing aspects, where they want to actually put muscle on and grow, it does exactly that. Matter of fact, there was a kid I knew growing up. He was a type 1 diabetic. This kid was strong as a house. He looked like he was on a cycle of steroids when he was a teenager. And he wasn't. But insulin has an anabolic effect when you combine it with exercise and with training. And that's exactly what was happening. He was super strong, great power lifter. And his blood sugars were better because of that, because his insulin sensitivity was good, meaning his insulin receptor numbers were high, even though he was taking exogenous insulin. I hope that answers the question. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because you have two conflicting things. And if you read some of the studies, they'll say, well, exogenous insulin, too much insulin in the system decreases insulin sensitivity. But it doesn't do that in people who weight train or people who are athletes. The athletic endeavor kind of overrides that effect and raises insulin sensitivity.
Second question from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. This is another insulin-related question. The user says he's a type 2 diabetic. He wants to follow your protocol as far as insulin and mass gaining is concerned. I wanted your opinion what to do as far as insulin usage, which I am on both Lantus at night, 34 IU, and 10 units with each meal Novalog. Hard for me to put on size.
Did he say he's a type 2 diabetic, right?
Type 2, yes.
Yeah, type 1 diabetics are people who don't produce any insulin. Okay, it's usually due to an autoimmune disease where the body just destroys the beta cells of the pancreas. The pancreas doesn't produce any insulin. Whereas type 2 is a different situation because you do produce some insulin, you're just not producing enough. This person is taking a lot of insulin. Now, they didn't really say whether they were doing it for performance enhancement or if they were doing it because they were just trying to control their blood sugars. But he's on a type 1 type of protocol where he's taking a long acting and he's taking a short acting at every meal to make sure he absorbs all his food, which would imply that potentially he doesn't produce any insulin. But I don't think that's the case because he said he's a type 2 diabetic. Now the question he had was, what was the question? What was the question? I confused myself. Sid.
Yeah, he says that he's having trouble putting on size.
Oh, putting on size. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So. Right. He wants to follow your protocols, but just given,
right. Well, if you're controlling your blood sugars, in other words, you're absorbing your food, which is what I call controlling blood sugars. So if blood sugars are normal, you're absorbing everything that you're eating. Okay, that's a good thing. Sometimes people don't absorb all their food. They're eating a lot of food and their blood sugars are high and they're not really absorbing. Assuming you're absorbing all your food and you're weight training adequately and you're taking the right supplements and if you're doing PEDs, which I'm assuming he is, and you're still not gaining size, you're not growing, it's got to be the fact that you're not eating enough food. So I don't think it's an insulin issue. I think with him it's a food issue. Either he's not eating enough protein or he's not eating enough carbs or he's not eating enough fats or maybe a little combination of all of the above. I usually assess, whether a person is consuming enough I first try to increase protein. If that doesn't solve the problem and the person looks kind of deflated and flat a little bit, then I'd say they're probably carb depleted. So I'll give them more carbs so that their body doesn't use the protein they're eating to turn it into carbs for fuel. And then usually right after I increase protein, if that doesn't work, I'll usually bump fat up a little bit too, just to see if that helps. But usually it's either carbs or protein that you're not doing enough of, assuming that you're doing my formula of a half to 3/4 of a gram of fat per pound. If you're under that amount, you're not eating enough fat, up your fat. But once fat kind of hits that threshold number, more usually doesn't help the situation. You got to increase protein or carbs. So this situation to me seems as though he's not eating enough. And you know what? It's sometimes very hard to eat enough food in the off season. I know I probably 90% of the meals that I would eat in the off season were not things that I looked forward to eating. Like, in other words, I wasn't hungry most of the time. Maybe 1 or 2 meals out of the day, I was actually, oh man, I can't wait to eat because I'm hungry. Usually it's you. Oh no, I got to eat another meal. I still feel the other meal in my stomach. That's usually the feeling. But that comes to the territory. It's not easy to put muscle on. It's not easy to eat a lot of food, but you got to train yourself to do it. And that's the only way. That's the only way you're going to put size on. Now, these 2 questions came from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. We get great questions on that app. That app is a place you can go for $29 a month. You can download it from your Android store or your iTunes store. And you basically have me as a coach in your pocket. So you have all my writings, all my videos I've ever done. Plus, I answer everyone's questions in an open forum. So you see everyone's questions, everyone's answers. I also do a Q&A video once a week, every single week, never miss, on the app, just for the app members as well. And we put up all my workouts. We put up a workout every week, and then we put up all my protocols, diets, off-season, drug cycles. There's a lot of great information on that app, so you might want to check it out once again, at your Android store or your iTunes store.
Let's go to our Instagram questions. Again, if you're not already following us there on Instagram, the handle is official_RxMuscle. If you're new to this channel, we welcome you. We ask that you subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of our shows, including this one, all new episode of the After Hours podcast, Heavy Muscle Radio, of course, Iron Rage tomorrow with Lee Priest, Dave's reaction video, so much more. Muscle in the Morning, Iron Therapy. Subscribe below, hit the notification bell. If you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. Protein Special Listen. Diagnosed with heart failure, been on ramipril and beta blockers after 6 months. My heart hasn't shrunk, still have the low ejection fraction of around 30%. I used a small amount of GH, 2IU, and kratom, which supposedly has a parasympathetic response. How likely is it that these 2 things have kept the heart from shrinking? I've had no vaccine shots, so that's not a factor.
Yeah, number one, if you're trying to shrink your heart, you don't want to take any anabolic steroids, and you don't want to take any growth hormone, okay? Because if your heart is bigger because of it's more muscular, and maybe it got bigger because you're weight trained and you have a lot of muscle in your body, the heart is a muscle. It will atrophy just like the muscles will. And my heart was big, from being a 300-pound bodybuilder, and it took me a while to shrink my heart. My left ventricle, was very, very thick, and it's still a little moderately thick now, but it's certainly smaller than it was. But yeah, you got to stop the anabolics. That's not good. Now, the ramipril, which is an ACE inhibitor, and the beta blocker is also supposed to help, I guess, ease the pressure on the heart. Because what happens is when the blood comes in hard into the heart's a muscle. It's got to react and pump that blood out, and it builds itself up. And sometimes what happens is the chamber, the left ventricle, which pumps the blood to the body, gets so thick and dense that it actually reduces the amount of volume that it can hold blood-wise. So when it pumps, it's not releasing as much blood. So that's why you have a lower ejection fraction, which, in my mind, is not necessarily a bad thing. In other words, if you don't feel like you're short of breath or anything like that, having a heart that can pump harder, less blood, isn't necessarily a bad thing until it becomes pathological, until the point where you're backing up, maybe you have swelling in your legs, or you're not able to pump enough blood to the muscles to provide it with enough oxygen. So there's like a fine line between what we call an athletic heart that's big and thick versus a pathological heart, which is a heart that's not effectively pumping blood. So you might have an athletic heart. If you want to try to get it shrunk down a little bit to raise that ejection fraction, however, you got to stay off the anabolics.
To Austin Holistic, he mentions a specific brand of diuretic, but I'll just say diuretic. Can you take a diuretic and aldactone at the same time for a competition, or do they not complement one another?
That was the protocol back in the 80s and 90s. Aldactone for a couple, 3-4 days, and then you'd throw diazide in there. I always cramped excessively when I did that, and I feel like it's too much. It's overkill. Aldactone inhibits aldosterone, which is a hormone produced by the adrenal glands that tell the kidneys, reabsorb sodium in water. So theoretically, if you block aldosterone using aldactone, you're going to lose water. Okay. The problem is if you lose too much sodium and too much water and you start cramping, if you start eating salt, you're not going to absorb the sodium because the aldactone is inhibiting the aldosterone from allowing the kidneys to absorb sodium. So that's what I don't like about that drug, because once again, if you can't reabsorb sodium, you can't fix the problem. Now, another thing to consider is aldactone is also potassium sparing. So if you're on it too long and you take too much of it, we've seen this happen. A couple of women died recently in the last year or two because of potassium overload. Too much potassium, your heart stops beating. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. So you can certainly have major problems if you have too much. And then if you're eating foods that have a lot of potassium in them, some people eat a lot of potatoes, they're carb up, not a good idea. So I always liked, and we've talked about this probably 1,000 times already, but I like Diazide because Diazide is potassium sparing, so it doesn't make you lose potassium. And you don't retain potassium, it kind of balances each other off because there's two drugs. One drug is hydrochlorothiazide, which causes sodium and potassium loss. And then there's triamterene in there, which causes you to retain potassium. So the net effect is you don't lose any potassium, you only lose sodium and water. If you happen to deplete too much out, and I usually recommend Diazide for maybe the day before, maybe 2 half a pills or something like that. But if you do deplete too much sodium out and you cramp, it's very simple to fix the problem. You can just eat some salt because you're not stifling aldosterone's effects. You're not even touching aldosterone. You're just pushing extra sodium out of the body. And if you need more, you just consume it. So Diazide's a much safer way to go diuretic-wise. Aldactone is really, and you know what? Another thing people don't even realize, you know what aldactone is used for, especially in today's world of transgender? If you're a man and you want to become a woman, the first thing they put you on is aldactone. And the reason they do that is not because they want you to lose fluid. It's because aldactone is an anti-androgen. It inhibits androgens in the body. So it will actually counteract all the masculinizing effects of testosterone in your body, which is not something you want. Now that effect usually takes, more than a week to start happening. But why would you want to put something that blocks androgens into a male body that's trying to get, ready for a bodybuilding show where androgens are going to make you look good on stage? So not a big fan of aldactone. And the weird thing, the funny thing is in people with heart issues, a lot of times they like to put you on aldactone because it does something with fluid balance in the heart. And it's the worst thing for a man to take long-term because it has that anti-androgen effect, especially if you're not taking any hormone replacement. Forget about it. It'll neuter you essentially. For people who don't know, that swimmer, Leah Thomas, who was swimming for, University of Pennsylvania, who won all those championships. And then I think they just recently stripped them away from her. But that's all she was taking. She was basically a man who took aldactone. That's it. That was it. That was the only difference between her before and after. And, it definitely feminized her, but obviously it didn't affect her performance too much. But it did obviously effectively neutralize her testosterone low enough that she passed, drug tests. So take it for what it's worth.
Interesting question here, only because I mean, he's asking whether it's an underrated subject. I feel as if it is a topic that is getting a lot more attention now in particular. Questions from Sarwat Ghalib. Gut health. Is it an underrated subject in bodybuilding? I feel as if there is so much focus on drug supplements, not enough talk about gut health. But I do feel like it is a topic that has been trending and obviously one that you're very particular about.
Yeah, I really kind of got into gut health, more so toward the end of my bodybuilding career. And I realized how important fiber was. But, now I'm really big into probiotics too. Probiotics basically repopulate the colonic lining with good bacteria. Now, if you feed yourself the right foods and take the right fiber supplements, which are big, it's funny because fiber supplements do a lot of great things. We know they detox the body, they help you poop regularly, they regulate that. They're good for strengthening, the colon because it makes the colon contract. It lowers LDL cholesterol, but it also happens to be a food source for the good bacteria in your colon. So the bacteria in there ferment like let's say you're using my CARBOLYZE. The psyllium, which is a soluble source of fiber, gets fermented by the gut bacteria, and it actually feeds them. So it makes them healthy. It's like feeding we call that, prebiotics, because the bacteria can use it as a food source, which then allows them to replicate themselves and stay strong. Remember, the lining of your colon is covered in a very thick, dense, coating of these good bacteria. When they get depleted, whether it be poor diet or taking of antibiotics or whatever the case may be that depletes those, stress, once that bacterial, basically shield that's around the inside of your colon disappears, you get what's called leaky gut, because there's spaces where toxins can get through and get into your body, which is what normally would not happen because the gut bacteria would protect them. So not only is it important to keep the colon healthy, the actual physical, nature of the colon, but the probiotics that line the colon and even the small intestine, for that matter, are very protective. So when you neglect, your colonic health by not taking a good fiber supplement, which number one is going to, once again, keep the colon strong, and it's going to feed these gut bacteria, and you don't take a probiotic when your gut bacteria are depleted and your digestion is off, you're really doing yourself a disservice, because we're finding now more and more that these gut bacteria do so many things in the body that we can't even believe, all the chemical reactions they're involved in. They communicate with the brain. They communicate with the immune system. It's incredible. They're even speculating now that gut bacteria, depletion can be also one of the causes of cancer in the body, which would not surprise me. Because if the immune system is not functioning well and you don't have your we don't have our defenses up and toxins are getting into the body, absolutely immune system suppression can lead to cancer growing unabated in the body. And that's not something that we want to see happen. So it's very important that you address gut health. And, I've been talking about this for a long time. The easiest thing to do is get on a good fiber supplement like CARBOLYZE. Now, a lot of people have been asking me, Sid, about ProtoLyze, our pudding, which I was thinking about renaming Palumbo's pudding. Someone had suggested, but that's not here nor there. But we are reformulating it with a probiotic formulation. So in other words, the pudding will still be just the way it was before, but we're adding a really nice probiotic, heat stable probiotic mix. So you don't have to worry about refrigerating the stuff. You'll make your little pudding concoction with the stuff. You take the scoop, 30 grams of protein per scoop, and you mix 2 ounces of water into it. You eat your pudding, carb-free, basically fat-free, and then guess what? You get all your probiotics you need to as well. So it's something I always wanted to do. I always wanted to sell a probiotic. I figured if I sold it alone, it wouldn't be as popular. But if we can put it into an actual protein shake, or in this case, we're going to put it into our pudding, since it's a food product, I think it's going to be amazing. So I look forward to that. Hopefully in the coming months, we'll see that product come out.
We actually did species nutritional related, get a couple of questions about CARBOLYZE. Any updates on CARBOLYZE?
Yeah, we're making it. It's ever since COVID, getting supplies has been really tough, and you can't just put an order in a lot of times, because if you do, you get ripped off and they charge you too much money. So you got to kind of shop it. So CARBOLYZE will be back out. I think it's in production now. I don't know what happened. I think we had to change the label because there was some. They're always, the FDA always changes compliance things. You have to put certain warnings on the label and stuff like that. So once you have to run new labels, it takes a little longer. And so, and we ran out of it because we did a sale on it and we sold more than we thought, or we gave away more than. I don't even remember what the problem was, but so it will be out, but probably in another couple months.
Let's go to iconic football. If you were to do a 400 mg test cycle and add one thing with it, what would it be, and for how long? For Body Recomp says he wants to go from being a fat boy to a non-fat boy. So 400 mg test cycle, what would you add and for how long?
Yeah, steroids don't burn fat. So, it's not like you're going to take a steroid that's going to cut you up or burn off all that belly fat. Not the way they work. But steroids do build muscle. And when you build more muscle in your body, you stimulate your metabolic rate. If I were, a guy just starting and I wanted to do some sort of a cycle to maybe add some more lean tissue to my body, and increase my metabolic rate a little bit, I would stick with very non-toxic, long-acting compounds. So if you're going to do some testosterone at 400 milligrams a week, I'd probably combine that with like DECA, 400 milligrams a week, or even 400 milligrams of equipoise a week. And these are long-acting compounds. They have no negative side effects. You're not going to have liver toxicity. They're not going to raise your blood pressure significantly. You're going to have basically, you're not even going to know you're on them, essentially, except the fact that you're going to put more muscle on and you're going to be in a much more anabolic state. You'll probably have a better sex drive and you'll probably recover better from your workouts. And that's what you want. A lot of people go the Anavar route, Winstrol. They think it's going to like, oh, Anavar burns fat. No, it doesn't burn fat. Doesn't burn fat. And it's not a very good it's not a very good muscle builder for men either. It's kind of shitty. It's weak. It works well for women because women have no masculinizing hormones in their body. They have very small amounts of testosterone. They put 20 milligrams of Anavar into their body every day. That's a significant increase, and that's why they respond so well. And women's androgen receptors are more sensitive than men's because of the fact they don't have a lot of testosterone in their body. But for a man to take Anavar, it's like eating M&Ms. You know, I don't know. Maybe M&Ms might give you more energy than the Anavar will. But so I'd rather see you use a long-acting injectable with the testosterone, something like I said, either equipoise or DECA. People like DECA because your joints feel really good on it. Even a little Masteron wouldn't be a bad thing. 200-300 milligrams a week of that with the 400 milligrams of test. So that's just my suggestion. Think of it in terms of what is the drug doing? It's building and repairing muscle. It's not burning fat.
Let's go to Arnold Teach. As a bodybuilder, how often and when is it best to do your detox diet?
You know, usually I have my guys do it after their show. So like if you do a show, because a lot of times, you know, guys that compete every year, you know, especially at the national level, they're doing an off season. They were going into pre-contest, and then we do the show, and then after the show, I clean them out off the drugs for 8 to 10 weeks. And usually, if it's necessary at that point where I think they need to do a detox, that's when we'll do the detox. You know, I usually let them get the eating out of their system for about 2 weeks, have a cheat meal once a day. After 2 weeks, most people are sick of eating already, and they're like, all right, I'm ready to do the detox. Then you do your detox for 3 weeks, and then you kind of start building again, going to an off-season scenario. And then when you're done with your off cycle, you can start up your new cycle for the year and start putting some size on. So that's usually the cyclical nature of how we do it. So I wouldn't do a detox in the middle of like a mass building cycle for sure, unless you felt terrible and you had some bad blood values. If you came back and said, hey, my creatinine's 1.8, and the doctor's really worried and my blood pressure's high and this is wrong. And all right, let's clean you out and let's do a detox and reset your organs again. That would be a different story. But on a regular cyclical basis, I would recommend usually after a show or after a diet, program that you're doing.
Nico Cantemir, why do you use 2 single compounds at the same time in the off season? He lists out Test plus AQ, Test plus DECA, Test plus Tren. Is it not better 3 at the same time?
I just got this question on the Dave Palumbo app questions I did. I just recorded this answer to this thing, and I'll give you the same answer I gave the app guys. 2 compounds are better than 1. Why? Because when if you took 2,000 milligrams of testosterone a week and you compared it with 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week and 600 milligrams of EQ a week, the 2 drugs together would give you a better result than the 2,000 milligrams alone of testosterone. Why? We don't know. For some reason, 2 anabolics together have this synergistic, or we call it stacking effect, where they kind of amplify each other. Now, if you add a 3rd or 4th compound, they don't really amplify each other that much more. So in other words, the magic happens when you put 2 compounds together. When you add more, you don't necessarily get that, exponential growth effect. So what you're really just doing is you're really just adding another compound that's going to add another level of toxicity to the body. You might get, hit the androgen receptor from a slightly different angle. But what I like to do off season is I like to change the compounds every 6 weeks. So I might go testosterone DECA for 6 weeks. Then I'll switch to testosterone equipoise for 2 weeks. Why do I do that? Because I'm hitting the androgen receptor with this new drug from a slightly different angle. And for some reason, and no one knows why, it works. For some reason, when you switch the anabolics, you get a different effect in the body. Then I might switch to, Masteron for, 6 weeks, or DECA. I don't know if I repeated myself. Maybe some Trenbolone for 6 weeks. So I go 2 drugs at a time because you're going to get the best bang for your buck with those 2. Plus, you're keeping toxicity low. Remember, if you start putting too many drugs in one time, let's say you're putting 4 or 5 drugs at a time in, you're increasing toxicity. When you increase toxicity in your body doesn't want to eat. Okay, it kills your appetite. And the most important thing off season for growth is being able to eat all that food. Most people don't have a problem taking a shot. Most people don't have a problem going to the gym and working out, but they do have a problem eating all the food that they need to grow. And a lot of times that encompasses 7, 8 meals a day, you know? So if you're having trouble eating, you certainly don't want to toxify your body. And that's why if you stay away from orals and you do the two drugs at a time protocol that I use, you're going to get better results. Now, pre-contest, I might go to 3 or 4 drugs. Why? Because at that point, first of all, you're never going to have a problem eating while you contest dieting because you're going to be starved all the time. So that's not an issue. And, and we're not trying to at this point, put size on. We're trying to just make the body look as freaky as possible. So we'll go with multiple compounds at this time. And then after the show's over, we'll clean you out so that we can get your receptors reset. But in the off season, because you're doing long cycles, it could be 6, 8 months. You don't want to blow the receptors, so to speak, by throwing too many drugs in at one time. So that's why we switch every 6 to 8 weeks.
Let's go to Rock. My TRT clinic recommended PEG-MGF for site-specific muscle growth. I'm currently taking IGF-1, seeing good results from that. Would the PEG-MGF be a good add-on or replacement for my current IGF-1 dose of 30 units 5 times a week?
Yeah. MGF is mechanogrowth factor. It's basically the same thing as IGF-1, except it's locally produced. So in other words, when you take growth hormone, your body releases it naturally. When the growth hormone goes to your liver, it tells the liver to release IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is what's responsible for causing muscle hyperplasia, which is the conversion of stem cells into mature muscle cells. Okay. You also produce IGF locally. So when you go and do a bicep workout at the gym and you break down muscles in the bicep, you're releasing very small amounts of local acting IGF-1. It's called mechanogrowth factor. It's the same hormone essentially. And it's being constantly trickled out as the cells get damaged in the gym. And it's basically like telling the body, hey, we're going to build some muscle here. We need to repair this area here. And so the body increases its IGF-1 receptors in that area. The mechanogrowth factor can bind to that and help with the repair process. So the people who make drugs and put them out suggested, hey, we got this mechanogrowth factor. We can synthesize it now in a lab using bacteria like we do IGF-1 and growth hormone. If you take this stuff and you inject it locally, you're gonna grow muscle. Well, of course, everyone tried it right when it first came out, and no one grew any muscle locally. And the reason is because when you inject it into a muscle, let's say the bicep muscle, that mechanogrowth factor instantly goes into the bloodstream. Because that's what stuff does when you inject it. Whether you inject it into the muscle or you inject it under the skin subcutaneously, the body absorbs it into the bloodstream. Once it goes into the bloodstream, it doesn't stay here. The reason why your natural mechanogrowth factor has an effect and does something is because it's just being constantly trickled out of the muscle for a long period of time. So it's like bathing that area in mechanogrowth factor. You really can't do that. You can't mimic that artificially. And so basically what you're doing is by injecting mechanogrowth factor, it's just going into your bloodstream and it's acting like regular IGF-1. And if anyone know anything about regular IGF-1, it doesn't last that long in the system. It only lasts 20 minutes. That's why we use long R3 IGF-1, which is a modified form of IGF-1 where they've actually added side groups onto it so that the IGF-1 binding proteins in the bloodstream, these are the proteins that bind up or grab up IGF-1 and inactivate it, are found. If you change the IGF-1 molecule and you make it this long R3 version, the binding proteins don't recognize it. So they can't bind up IGF-1, and then IGF-1 lasts much longer in the system, sometimes up to 20 hours. So you get a better effect. The problem with IGF-1 is, and maybe I'm giving too much information, is that if you take too much of it in one shot, your body down-regulates IGF-1 receptors. So too much IGF-1, your body doesn't respond to it. So you have less is better with IGF-1. I found that 10 to 20 micrograms max per dose, usually it's taken post-workout, is a much better way to go. If you take more than that, you tend to down-regulate very quickly to it and stops working. Hopefully that explains, IGF-1 for you.
Take two more questions. This one from Dedgewick, kind of a loaded question, but a very basic question. Tren A or E?
I break it up this way. I recommend that people use. I haven't taken a shot of Trenbolone in I don't even know when, 2004, maybe. Use Trenbolone and Anthate, which is the long-acting version of Trenbolone, in the off season, because in the off season you don't need it hitting you fast. You don't want to get all the side effects that occur with a fast-acting Trenbolone, like restlessness, not inability to sleep. A lot of times it messes up digestion. It does, and it raises blood pressure too. But the long-acting one doesn't seem to have as many side effects, yet you still get the benefits of muscle growth and strength and aggression. Pre-contest, I like to use Trenbolone acetate on the athletes because it definitely has a better cosmetic effect on the body, because it hits you so fast and it raises androgen levels in the body so fast, you get a better glycogen storing effect in the muscle. So especially, right before a show, you tend to look better on Trenbolone acetate. Also, it makes you very strong. You can take a shot in the morning when you go to the gym. In a couple hours, you're going to feel that. Problem is, it will keep you up at night. A lot of times, guys can't sleep the last 4 to 6 weeks before a show. They got to take like a Xanax or something like that to go to bed. Some people have digestive issues from it, usually dose related, but not always. Sometimes I know people that if they look at the Trenbolone bottle, they get acid reflux from it. Some people get chronic hiccups from it. So a lot of times the Trenbolone and Anthate is better tolerated. And sometimes there are people who can't tolerate any Trenbolone whatsoever. So my rule of thumb usually is off-season and Anthate, pre-contest, the acetate.
I wanted to get this one in as well. It's from Ray Ryan. Good substitute for esiclene now in bodybuilding.
I was on the Dennis James podcast.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. That was yesterday, right?
Yeah. I record. I don't know when he's going to put it up, but we recorded it. And one of the questions that Dennis was asking me about was synthol. About the use of it, and I kind of gave him the history of it. Chris Clark originated it back in the '90s, and I sold it for years. On my Dave Palumbo site, and I liked it. It was probably the best drug. It was the best version of that out there. Now, originally, before Chris Clark existed, there was a drug known as esiclene, which was a water-based steroid. It was called formobolin. And it didn't really build any muscle, but when you injected it into an area, it made it swell. So guys who had very round muscle groups, like Flex Wheeler, he loved that stuff. And when you injected it, it made the muscle look more round. And guys, would hit it in all the round body parts, shoulders and biceps and triceps and calves. And but then they stopped making it, like in the mid 90s. So guys were switching to the Chris Clark synthol product, which was basically like a sterile oil with some glycoproteins in there and some lipoprotein lipase, which is a fat digestion enzyme. There was a bunch of it was an interesting format. I didn't know exactly all the ingredients because Chris would never tell me. But then Chris died a few years ago, and my inventory of it ran out. And then there was another product known as Painless Pumps, and Steve DeLuca owned that company, and he died a few years ago too. So I don't have any of that anymore. But guys still use it. I mean, site injection oils are very popular, and the people who use it and don't abuse it. If you abuse it, it's obvious. People see lumps and bumps, and it looks terrible. But the people who use it cosmetically well, just like there's good plastic surgeons and there's bad plastic surgeons. I've seen people who get like Botox and some fillers, and they look amazing, natural, looks great. And I see other people, they look like, like they belong in some kind of a circus freak show. So the question is, are people using it? That Dennis James asked me, and I said, absolutely. And even if they're not using site injection oils per se, a lot of people just inject their regular gear into the body parts. So Today, guys take crazy amounts of gear. I know people taking 2,000-3,000 milligrams of testosterone a week. I don't know why, but that's a lot of oil. You got to put it somewhere. So a lot of times they shoot their arms with it. They shoot their biceps, triceps. They put it in their calves, lats, whatever. And so essentially, you're creating like a site injection oil out of your steroids you're using. So anyone who says, I don't ever use synthol, I've never used synthol, well, they may have never used synthol, but they've actually injected their body parts, I'm sure, prior with other stuff like testosterone or equipoise or Deca or Trenbolone or whatever they happen to be using. So there's always people who are going to try to enhance a body part by putting something into it. And I think that will never stop because, once again, why wouldn't you do it? You got to inject the stuff anyway. You might as well put it someplace where your body needs a little extra size, a little extra swelling. The question is, are you going to be a good artist or are you going to be a crappy artist? If you're going to be a crappy artist, the judges are going to see it and they're going to mark you down. If you're a good artist, no one will ever know.
Take this last question from M. Seta. Was Superdrol originally a pro-hormone and legal to buy at one point? Your opinion on it for gaining size and strength?
Yeah. Well, it was called a pro-hormone, but it was really an anabolic steroid. Pro-hormone, the only true pro-hormones when they first came out on the market, Patrick Arnold, who's a genius, by the way, friend of mine too. And he's the guy who came up with the stuff called the Clear that the Olympic athletes were using. It was an undetectable anabolic steroid that they couldn't detect. And these athletes used it at the Australian Olympics and the Sydney, Australia Olympics, and they won tons of medals because of it, because no one could detect it. And I think it was around the same time, Patrick also had developed something known as a pro-hormone, which he called the pro-hormone. So testosterone in the body is made from androstenedione. So he surmised if I can synthesize androstenedione, it's really not testosterone, so it's not illegal. And we could put it in an oral form, and if you take it, your body will convert it into testosterone. So in essence, it's a pro-hormone, before the actual hormone is made, and they sold these. And they had androstenedione, then they made a norandrostenedione, which was like a precursor to Deca. Essentially, your body converted it to nortestosterone. And they had a whole bunch of different ones that came out, and they were real pro-hormones. Eventually, these companies that were producing these pro-hormones realized they were making big money, and they had banned a few of them. And what they started doing is finding drugs, steroids, that had been figured out on paper, but had never been approved for use by the FDA. So Superdrol was one of those drugs. It was a drug a steroid they had spun up and figured out conceptually in a lab, but they might have made it, but they said, you know what? When they tested it, had too many toxic side effects. They never made it. The rewards to the risk are too high on the risk side. We're not going to make this. But because it was never made, it was never classified. So it was never classified a controlled substance or anything. It was kind of just floating in limbo. So some brilliant, person got it and started selling it. They had it synthesized probably in China, and then they started selling it as a pro-hormone. But it really wasn't a pro-hormone. It was really a synthetic anabolic steroid that just had never been classified. And it worked. It was strong, and it's probably still floating around the market someplace. It's strong, but it has a lot of toxic side effects. Very, very toxic to the liver. I think it's more toxic to the liver than Anadrol 50 is. So would I use it? No. Are you going to have trouble eating in the off season with that drug? Yes. Is it going to probably cause a lot more side effects than doing a real cycle of steroids like testosterone and equipoise? Absolutely. So why would you do it? I always wondered why people use those drugs. I guess it was just because they were easier to access, because people were selling them, quote, legally, gray market, and it was just easy to procure it. And a lot of people don't want to take shots, so they figured, oh, this is an easy way to put on some muscle. But you always have to look at the risk to reward side effects. And, that never would have been a drug that would have ever crossed my mind. Hey, I'm going to use this. When I first started using anabolics, if I had to choose, hey, this is legal, I can actually pick this up from the local vitamin store or from Amazon or wherever people were selling it, versus taking something that was illegal like testosterone, but I knew at least it was safe. I would always pick the testosterone. So you got to do your research. Don't just knee jerk buy stuff because your friend said, "Oh, this shit is the crap. It works so good. I got so strong. I put so much muscle on it. I got pumps in the gym." That's not science. That's pseudoscience, as I call it. And that's the best way to mess up your body. So be smart. There's no shortcuts. You know, if you're gonna make the decision to use performance enhancing drugs, at least use the ones that have the lowest risk, okay, with the most benefit.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Right now on the channel, all new episode of After Hours. We had a special guest, Joe Mackey, yesterday. I guess if you want to classify him as a power bodybuilder, one of the strongest IFBB pros on the planet. A lot of fun, a lot of good conversation yesterday. Check it out, After Hours on the channel. And of course, all new episode of Heavy Muscle Radio. Dave Palumbo, Chris Aceto talking about his road trip to Bev's gym and a lot of cool stories along the way. And then, of course,
Sid, not to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt you. Joe Mackey, you got to watch this interview. Joe Mackey is a very interesting guy because not only is he super crazy strong, okay, and not only is he a great bodybuilder who's got a great physique, but he's a great businessman. He is making a fortune in solar energy, and he tells us all about, you know, this new facility they're opening up and all the solar stuff he's selling down there in Texas, and then I think he's in Oklahoma now, and he's doing well because he's buying some fancy cars and he's become a real businessman. So I had asked him, is he going to compete this year? And he's like, you know, I'm really focusing on my business because it's been growing by leaps and bounds, and maybe next year I'll compete, which I found to be a very mature, you know, thing because he's 39. You know, a lot of guys might say, hey, I got to compete while I'm still young, you know, but he's put his life into perspective. You know, hey, I got a chance to make a lot of money here. I enjoy the business. I know what I'm talking about, and he's all in on this thing. So I want to, you know, big congratulations. Watch the interview; it's very interesting, and he loves to have fun too. So we had a good time on the show.
No, it was actually really cool. That was probably one of the more unexpected sides of the interview. I mean, he goes fully in depth. I mean, as far as not only the solar panels, but just the process behind it, the business model that he has now. And I mean, you know, as it projects going forward, you know, the potential market share that's available for him and specifically what he's doing right now with solar. I mean, we always get the question about like, well, how do I make money in bodybuilding? Well, this will help you in terms of just how to make money, because he has such a refreshing, really modern perspective on business building and everything. It was really, really cool. Yeah. A lot of layers to that interview. We figured he was going to come on, talk about his crazy 860-pound, you know, deadlift or whatever. But no, I mean, he got it fully into, you know, how he's being successful, how, you know, he's launched his successful business, how he's maintaining it, and how he's scaling it and plans to scale it going forward. So really, really cool, you know, side of Joe Mackey that you may not have known before, but I think a very inspirational side, and hopefully you can learn a couple of things from it as well.
I want to say one thing about it. You know, it's funny because, you know, I'm very predictable to myself because I'm listening to him talk about solar, and I'm like, you know, this might be a good business to get into because, you know, it's still in its fledgling,
still in its
level, and he's got good connections. And I'm saying to myself, do you really want to sell solar energy and solar panels? And I'm like, no way. I'd rather just be poor. like I'm so like into what I like. Like I cannot go outside of what I enjoy doing. Like I'll sell reptiles. I'll sell nutritional supplements. I'll go online and talk about, you know, vitamins and health and well-being all day long. I'll work for 18 hours a day on that stuff because I really, really enjoy it. But for me, even if someone said, hey, you want to make 10 million bucks in the next 12 months, here, this is what you got to do. You got to go out and sell. I wouldn't even want to do it. I'd be like, you know what? You do it. You make the money, because I don't like to do anything that I don't really enjoy. And I find that I'm not good at things that I don't enjoy. So if you find a passion, this is my message to everyone out there. If you find something that you're really passionate about, and it might be making money you might be passionate about, which might be a good reason to go into solar panel sales, follow your gut. Your gut will never lead you astray. But don't do things that you really don't like, because you're never going to be good at it. Joe loves the business that he's in. He really enjoys what he's doing, and that's why he's really good at it. And it's not just he's not just doing it to make money. He's actually good at what he does, and he likes it. And that's an important take-home message. So don't necessarily try to copy everyone else what they're doing. Find what you enjoy doing and do it well. That's my best advice.
So that full episode right now, as well as Heavy Muscle Radio live right now on the channel, as well as Dave's reaction to Good Vito's injury during his guest posing this past weekend. And of course, all new episode of Iron Rage tomorrow with Lee Priest. Speaking of Lee Priest, brand new show coming out. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to test the new format out, but a lot of you have been asking for it, and well, now it's going to come to fruition. Lee Priest and Jimmy the Bull, their brand new show debuting next week.
The question, Sid, will it be monetizable? That will be the question.
Yeah. Monetizable. I'm just hoping that we're still on YouTube.
Will allow us to monetize that show?
Forget about monetization. I'm just hoping that we're still on YouTube after the next 2 to 3 weeks. So fingers crossed.
That's true.
Jimmy the Bull, Lee Priest should be a lot of fun. That's going to be coming out next week. Again, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. So much going on right now on the channel. You're not going to want to miss any of it. And then, of course, over the course of the next couple of months, as the contest season really starts to heat up, we're going to have all of our coverage. We will certainly be bringing back some of our older formats, Iron Debate, getting some educated opinions. Will be a guru talk as well. We're going to look to bring on some of the brightest minds in the bodybuilding industry. And then, of course, Dave Palumbo and John Romano, that show that people keep asking about, but hasn't happened in about a month. I'm going to get on Dave. We're going to get that show back. So a lot to look forward to. Subscribe below, hit the notification bell if you like what you're watching, hit the like button, comment below. We will see you next week.